It's 3 o'clock, everyone, and we do have a quorum, so we'll call the meeting to order. Any introductions we need to do? Any visitors? Anybody that? Yes. Okay, thank you. Sounds good to me. Before we go any further, we'll let you know that our Vice Chair Welling Clark, first Vice Chair, will not be here today. He had retina surgery yesterday. He's at home recuperating. He's not the happiest person in the world. He said to let you know that he's not a good patient, but he's on the mend. He'll be up and going in a couple of weeks, but he just wanted to let everybody know where he's at. And so that's the update on Welling without going into graphic detail. Okay, moving on to item 2, the agenda approval. If you've had an opportunity to look at that, we'll take a motion to accept.
This is Miley. I'll move to accept the agenda.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second. Kathy Heisey found Calhan.
Okay, any additional discussion? Seeing or hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the agenda's approved. Consent items, okay. Is there anything, losing my voice here. Is there anything that anybody on the committee needs to bring up, discuss?
I didn't even see that. I'm still concerned about the safety issue. If we could have that back on the agenda for our first meeting soon. Both from the state, they're concerned about the increase in fatalities. And as we heard at a previous meeting, the new change of category from aggressive to competitive, which is apparently worse than aggressive. And then recently in our local paper, there was a concern about the incredible increase in hit and run where the driver doesn't stay. It just seems to me like the safety issues are accelerating. And as a parent and a grandparent, I still would really like to see, I don't know if it's appropriate for PPACG to talk with the local school districts, but Safe Routes to School and Vision Zero are programs that seem to work well in other communities. And so I'm just wondering if it would be reasonable for us to consider looking at those, because certainly the situation does not seem to be getting better. It's a possibility.
If you would send your information and your comment to me and also to Jarrett. Well, you're covering for Danelle, aren't you, Jarrett?
I am, but Mr. Chair, I was just kind of go back to the agenda item at hand, which is the approval of the minutes of the last meeting.
Oh, I was on the one just above it. Discussion committee members.
Which agenda do you have?
Sorry. Well, you said that, and I'll go back to what we were going to say in a minute, but if we can have a motion at this time to approve the minutes. Thank you, Jared.
Well, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve the minutes of the previous meeting.
That was Miley. Do we have and we've got a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that's out of the way, and we'll go back to the discussion. Anyway, if you could email that to me, and why don't you send it to both if you would. If you would, please. And that way we'll make sure it's acted on. Okay, yeah. Any public comments? And we know you're on the agenda, so anyone online, Jerry?
So, Mr. Chair, we did not receive any advance requests for public comment. I will ask, I believe that everyone online is either staff or members of the CAC. So I don't have anyone online who would need to raise their hand to do public comment. So seeing none, I think we're good to proceed.
Okay, this is moving too fast. Okay. Okay, we'll move on to action items, and I believe Jared's covering for John on the CAC member. For those of you online, Jared's taking a second to load his information here.
Alrighty, so action item 5A. So according to the bylaws, we do have absentee attendance policy. And we do have one CAC member, a citizen at large, Michael Colomb, if I'm saying that name correct, who after multiple attempts to contact by both staff as well as committee officers has been non-responsive. And so the staff's opinion for your approval would be to vacate his seat.
Okay, at this time, we ask for a motion to do so.
I'll make the motion to remove Michael Colomb from membership due to too many absences.
In a second.
Gary Sugar, I second.
Okay, and now we'll open the floor up for any discussion, being that that's been motioned and seconded. Anyone online, Jared, that you could? Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I didn't
Chris
look at my
Crockett
side.
with Kono. I just had a question. The criteria that are laid out in the information item that we have, I'm wondering if there are any other members who are sort of approaching that stage where they will be considered or likely to be considered for removal as well. Where do we stand with other people? I know it's been hard with meeting virtually, but I just wondered what the status of the committee is.
So not having the spreadsheet in front of me, and Danelle is the one who has been really tracking that. But just kind of browsing through this, no one else jumps to mind. There are a couple that would be close, but don't hit that mark.
And we
yet.
did have one that did resign.
Yep, that's the next action item.
Okay,
though. So let's
Next item. But what I will say, Danelle sent the information to me, and I shared with Welling as well. And we also made the attempts to do the emailed phone calls. So it wasn't just the staff. So it's not something where staff comes in and says, we recommend removal. Efforts are made to reach out and ask if they want to continue. I mean, life changes and sometimes people can't, and that's understandable, but it's beneficial if we know what direction we're going.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Okay, Jared.
I'm good. I think it's just up to
Okay,
whether-
any other questions?
We do have a motion, I believe.
We've got a
Second.
motion and a second. Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So that passes unanimously, Jared.
Okay, so now going to the next one, which is filling these vacancies. So we have the vacancy that we just made at the moment. We also have one other person, Carol Campbell, who's her term expires today, actually. She has indicated that she is not able to continue. And the CAC bylaws also have the opportunity for 6 positions, which right now, before today, we had 5 filled. So between Michael's position that was just vacated, Carol's, which expires today, as well as a 6th one that hasn't been filled for quite a while, we do have 3 vacancies at the moment. At this point in the process, as outlined by our bylaws, it is up to the CAC to put out the call for any at-large people who are interested. Self-nominations are perfectly acceptable. What we would recommend is a subcommittee, which is what we did during the last at-large vacancy. Subcommittee of at least 3 individuals who can review applications and make a recommendation to the CAC, which will then go on to the board for final approval for CAC membership. We would like to be able to advertise this for a minimum of 30 days. So in terms of time commitment that we'd be looking at, we wouldn't be looking at anything until likely after July 4th. So that'll give us the entire month of June to put this into public notice, to make sure that it's advertised appropriately before the committee meets, ideally in early July, so that the CAC can make the final recommendation to the board at its July meeting.
Okay.
So yeah, so we would, based on however you guys want to look at it, what materials, whether it's just by name, whether it's materials that they would like to submit, whether it's just a letter of interest, resume or CV.
And this is for the at-large.
This is for the 3 at-larges. So these are not jurisdictional appointments. These are because those are made by the jurisdictions themselves. These are for the at-large positions.
I realized I didn't turn the mic on before. So I do know of someone who was very interested and she had tried to go through the Colorado Springs city part. So do I just get her name or do I send her to fill out an application someplace or?
So we would recommend that they fill out that they actually submit the materials.
The materials. So
Yep.
this is
Yeah,
filled out
Danelle will
someplace?
be making an actual posting and that's where they will respond to. And at this time, it doesn't exist.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
you're going to post a job posting sort of thing on the website and then we'll direct people to it. Is that
Yes,
correct?
and
Okay.
that would be a factor of whatever you guys would like to, basically the subcommittee will
Correct.
want to review.
Oh, I see. So the committee's going to decide what's going to be on this website job opening.
What you want, what you
Ah.
want, whether it's a letter of interest and a resume CV. I would probably just keep it at high level, maybe just a letter of interest. Just because A, you don't want to make it too onerous on someone who's qualified, and B, having sat on several search committees, you don't want to be reviewing mountains and mountains of materials. That's just, I won't be reviewing them. You, whoever's on the search subcommittee will be. I'm just.
Miley, calling on your past history, didn't we have 3 members on our previous subcommittee when we did this?
Yes.
Okay,
And I'll volunteer to be on that committee since I'm all hot on getting new members. Serves me right.
okay. And I would mention, since Welling's not here, he did ask if I would put his name forward. And so I'm doing that now. I guess I'm nominating him since he can't self-nominate. So,
I would have an interest on serving on that committee as well.
okay.
And this is Gary Sugar. Just to clarify, that announcement seeking volunteers also gets published in the paper, does it not?
It does. We would public notice it, which for an amount, I mean, it's for a week notice and it goes physically in the paper.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just out of curiosity and being a geographer, do you have like a geographic map of where we're all from? I mean, it seems to me it'd be reasonable to have some kind of geographic distribution considering the large area that we cover. Are there parts of the 3 counties that aren't well represented?
So that might be crossing a little into the jurisdictional
Okay.
conversation.
Yeah.
So each of our 16 members are entitled to a membership, and that's beyond the at-large. No, for the at-large position, it could be from anyone in the 3 counties.
Yeah, they can be from
Yeah.
any. Before we move on, is there anyone else that wants to put their name in the hat? We've got 3 anyone online? I guess I should have asked that.
Anne is saying no from what it sees from her camera.
Which way is Ann's head going? Okay.
No,
well,
thank you.
okay. Well, we have 3 that step forward. I need a motion to accept those 3
So moved.
in a second.
Second.
Any addition? Yes. We have Miley, Welling, and Kathy. Any questions online? I'm not seeing anything. None in the room. So we need you did a second. Any additional discussion on the 3 people that stepped forward on the subcommittee? Hearing none, all in favor, I say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Any opposed? And there are none. So we'll leave it up to the members on the subcommittee to get together and do your review and all of that good stuff. And I think Miley's got a little track record there, so she'll be beneficial.
So we'll also mention that since it is 3 members, that does throw us into public and open records or open meetings. So if you do meet, we need a 24-hour notice to be able to post it appropriately. So just awareness before we get too far down that road and we start meeting and breaking some laws.
That includes email and phone calls, correct?
That includes email and phone calls. You can one day, 24 hours.
I think
And you
Kathy and
can-
Welling are familiar with that.
Yep, and you can email to set a time for logistical stuff, but you can actually share opinions versus via email without it being an open meeting. But for the time being, do Danelle and me. It'll mostly be Danelle. I'm gonna, since she's not here.
Yeah, lucky her. Anything else, Jared?
I think we're good.
Okay, well, great. Thank you very much. And thank you for the volunteers. Welling will tell you tomorrow. Okay, moving on to information item, and that will be. And you're with the City of Colorado Springs, I believe,
Colorado Springs Utilities.
utilities,
So-
okay?
Is this on? That's on, right? You can hear me okay online, folks?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I'm going to begin with a little bit of background because the COS Creek Plan is not a Colorado Springs Utilities initiative, but I am here representing it. Some of you may have heard of the COS Creek Plan. I know Judith has seen at least this presentation one time in another forum. This initiative actually started a few years back, and last year it was called the Fountain VIP Vision Implementation Plan. And this was put together by Lyda Hill Philanthropies and using NES, and it was a vision of what Fountain Creek or what Monument Creek could be. And these folks here were the ones who got the ball rolling on the plan. And there was a lot of collaboration with the Greenway Foundation, which is up in Denver and on the South Platte. I think maybe you're familiar with all the work that has been done on the South Platte and all the revitalization and rejuvenation and things like that. So that group served as an inspiration for what the Fountain VIP and now the COS Creek Plan could be. And the summation of it all is taking waterways that we've turned our backs on for decades upon decades and actually making them an amenity as opposed to an eyesore or a blight or something of that nature. So the Fountain VIP was just a vision. It was just a plan and an idea and a vision to move forward. Well, this last year, January, February, the Fountain VIP became the COS Creek Plan, and there was an agreement that got together with Pikes Peak Waterways, which is the nonprofit philanthropic arm, as well as Colorado Springs Utilities and the City of Colorado Springs Stormwater Enterprise, so SWENT. So this is going to be a collaborative effort of multiple organizations working together to see if we can implement this COS Creek Plan. And that's what I'm here to present for you all today. And my ask of you all is feedback. What do you like? What do you not like? What are your questions? What are your concerns? And then I think there is some potential for partnerships. There's the 208 plan that PPACG manages, and see if there's some synergies that can help bring this together, because this is going to be a huge community outreach on multiple levels when this gets kicked off a little bit further. So yes, go ahead.
Will there be a website or something we can share later?
There is, and actually there's one at the end of this slide.
Okay,
At the end of this presentation. And then, yes, I would like to, there is a place you can give feedback on there if somebody thinks of something later and,
Okay.
wants to let us know.
okay, just wanted to be sure.
Yeah. So no, this is very early in the stages. We don't even have a full project design yet. We are still working on the 10% design. So this is very early in the process, and why we're coming to you all as stakeholders to solicit feedback and see what you think and what your thoughts are on this project. It's not going to, the first project probably won't happen until 2025, 2026. So there's some time to think on it. You can sleep on it a few times. And the goal of the COS Creek Plan is to restore the natural function of the creek. Monument Creek, if you've been up and down it, though it has some good spots, it has its issues as well, and it's not always perfectly functional. And we want to create a signature place where people can actually interact and engage with the water and the community. The creek can become part of the community and a place where we all can interact and engage with it. That's unfortunately not the case with Monument Creek or Fountain Creek right now, except in some very small places. And along with bringing people into the creek and a sense of community, this can be a catalyst for reinvestment and economic vitality. The creek runs right through the center of our city. If we improve that section from the city, from the center of the city outward, it could improve the economic vitality of our city as well. And we want to energize the community and deliver an authentic sense of placemaking. We want people to go down, make memories, have children actually interact with nature and do things like that. So it is bringing all that together. And in order to have all of that, you have to have a functional, healthy creek in which to do that. So this is the scope of the project area. I also should say this is a huge scope, but the COS Creek Plan is working on a 20-year timeline. It'll take approximately 20 years, maybe even longer, if all of these projects were to be implemented on our timeline. So they start up at the very north end of Monument Creek at the Rock Island Railroad and Monument Valley Park. Go ahead, Judith. Oh, well, the north end of Monument Creek in Colorado Springs, not in the Palmer Divide. So yes, in Colorado Springs. All of these projects are in the heart of Colorado Springs. So the first one's going to be Monument Valley Park. That's also where by Fontanero, which is where the city and the utilities have a huge fleet area there. And then it'll move all the way down project by project. There's 5 of them total, and I'm going to go through all of them. There's 5 of them total, and they will ping pong down the creek, and they will end at Tejon Street at Dorchester Park. And they're looking at 5 projects total for these. A little bit of context, we talked about planning and visions and everything else. There have been plans galore on Fountain Creek and Monument Creek, plan after plan after plan. The problem with plans is that they're great, but they have a tendency to sit on shelves and collect dust. And that's where COS Creek Plan came into. They wanted to take action and really create inertia and get the ball rolling on these projects. They are actually getting groups together and just doing a big heave ho. The time for talking is over. The time for action is now. These projects are going to take a long time to implement, like well outside of my career even. So the best time to start is today on working on this kind of stuff. So Monument Creek has a very flashy history, flashy as in floods. You can see from this map, I absolutely love this map, that how the creek has moved over the years, starting in 1895 and all the way down to 2021. And over the years, we've had a tendency to straighten the creek, and it doesn't function as well as it used to. There was a prevailing attitude back in the day that you had to take all the water and move it away from everything you wanted as quickly and as fast as possible. And this is not a healthy creek ecosystem. And so the creek was straightened, and we've had infrastructure, and we've had people come and move in, and now the creek is very confined. So there's some limits on what we can do with Monument Creek, but there's some good things we can do inside of that confinement. And, you know, this history of moving around is problematic. So the other thing this COS Creek Plan is looking for is resiliency. Monument Creek will move. There will be floods. There will be droughts. There will probably, unfortunately, be more forest fires. And so how can we make these projects resilient and sustainable on the long haul to weather all of this creek movement that we have on Monument Creek? And yeah, I think the photo on the bottom is a flood. And I think that was like, I want to say it says circa 1900, but I think it was 1903. And you can see how wide and damaged that bank is, like head cutting and everything else. And so that's a big challenge. And of course, as our city has grown, we have more stormwater issues now than we had before. And Monument Creek is a sandy bottom creek. It's meant to move around. It's meant to transport sediment. It's its job. And so when you have all these people and more stormwater and everything else like that, it just can exacerbate that situation and make it worse. So we don't live You know, we're not like Leadville. We don't live way up where there's just rocks everywhere. Oh, feel free. I'm an informal presenter. You can talk.
Okay, there's stormwater like
Mhm.
there was before Palmer got here. What's the difference between the natural stormwater that would have been here when Palmer was here and the water that's in the creek now? I mean, how much more of it comes from our 70% from the western slope?
That
How
is
much
that is a fantastic question. I'll do stormwater first. So from a stormwater perspective, there isn't any more stormwater. There's actually less stormwater. So it's not how much water is coming down the creek, it's how fast. Exactly. So if we were to chart our flow on a graph with poor stormwater, it would look like this. Short peaks, really bad scouring flows, blowout bridges, things like that. In a more natural system, that sharp peak would kind of come down and be a little more rounded, as water would take a longer time to return to the system. So the stormwater projects of today are trying to mimic that natural infiltration. Like, yes, some water will hit and run off and go to the creeks, they'll rise. But some of that water would take 24 or 48 hours, even longer, to return to the system. So that's the stormwater portion. The next portion is we've imported water from Trans Mountain and Trans Basin diversions. Fun question. Judith can't answer this one. How much water do you think Colorado Springs imports from Trans Mountain and Trans Basin diversions? Take a shot. It's a fun game.
Every citizen in Colorado Springs should know that
Yes.
answer. It's really
We import, it changes a little bit. On the whole, we import about 80% of our water from Trans Mountain and Trans Basin diversions. We get the other 20% from what we call our local system. So local system, think Pikes Peak, snow melt off Pikes Peak, and it comes down to Monument Creek and Fountain Creek. So that's a whole heck of a lot of water we're bringing in. That is a twofold, that's an interesting dynamic, because on one thing that's happened, does anybody happen to know when our peak usage date was? If you think about history, you could probably piece it together. So 2001, droughts of 2001 was our peak usage. And since then, we've done, Colorado Springs Utilities has done a ton of conservation efforts. And we are now using the same amount of water that we were using in 1986. So we went from our peak usage in 2001, and yet our city has grown by about 20%. And we're using that amount of water that we used in 1986. So we used to use, I think per person, we were right around 200 gallons per day per person. We're now down to 110, 120. And that's a pretty good conservation effort. These are water-wise rules, low flow, shower heads, toilets, things like that. So from that perspective, we have reduced the amount of water. The other thing is that the water you use, if it's used for outdoor irrigation, which about 40% of our water is outdoor irrigation in Colorado Springs. Hoping to move that needle with like the turf rules and some other things like that, and more natural watering of native grasses instead of Kentucky bluegrass that takes so much. So 40% is outside the home. That's going to return to the system in a more natural fashion. The other percentage is going to go through our wastewater treatment systems, and those are going to be discharged to the creek. So we have increased the base flow of Fountain Creek and Monument Creek. So the base flow, anecdotally, these stream systems used to run dry periodically, and now they don't. There's water, there's base flow in there all the time because of our wastewater systems. So not just us, but everybody in the watershed, Monument, Fountain, Fountain Sanitation, all of those guys. So we've improved, but we have still added water to the system, and the water we've added is in that base flow.
Do you want to estimate how much that base flow now is greater than the natural flow before Palmer got here?
That has been such a hard thing because it's been so flashy. So I don't actually have that statistic because it changes too much. So yeah, and in the summertime, it's like, geez, the native flow is the majority of the system. In the wintertime, when it's dry, it's wastewater. Wastewater creeps up and becomes the more dominant. They kind of switch back and forth based on the season too. So, sorry, I take side quests on my presentation. You guys said your meeting was going fast, and I'm like, I haven't started talking yet.
Question.
Oh, yes.
So what portion of the wastewater is used as gray water and is recycled and reused again?
We don't call it gray water. We have what's called non-potable water. and 11% of our overall water portfolio is used for non-potable use. So Patty Jewett, Prospect Lake, or Prospect Park, quite a few cemeteries and schools, Evergreen, use non-potable water, Kissing Camels as well. And so there's two different kinds of non-potable water. There's raw water off Monument Creek, which we can use. And then there's also what's called our tertiary wastewater, which is treated to a higher degree and then sent into the non-potable system to be used as that. And we have, Denver tries to one-up us, but we have the oldest non-potable water system in the state. And again, it's also 11% of our portfolio. So we're trying to use our water responsibly by using it multiple times. So. I wish gray water would take off a little bit more. But that's like dual plumbing in everybody's houses. So that's a challenge. Who is?
Sorry. My daughter and her family live in Northern California. They have both laundry to landscape and shower to flowers, and they've
cool.
had it for at least a decade very successfully. And in fact, the city helps pay for all of the parts that are needed to do the
conversion.
Yeah.
And I know some newer houses have both.
Bill, you're unmuted. Did you have a question?
No, just late getting on. I had car trouble getting home.
All right, just want to make sure.
So going through like the history of Monument Creek, this is the existing condition that we're living with Monument Creek today. It's channelized, there's levees, there's also a disconnection from the floodplain where the creek has dropped in size and it can no longer access its old floodplain. And this is what it looks like. There is some functionality there. We actually have a pretty robust fishery in Monument Creek, and there is quite a bit of wildlife down there and things like that. But it could be much, much better for both animals and humans at the same time. And you can see when you look, especially at this top picture, the trail is on the right-hand side. And then there's the channel, and then there's like kind of an access road. And that's not really a great floodplain because it's terraced. It's straight up and over and then straight up and over. And it doesn't really accommodate minor flooding like we've had this whole spring. We've just had high water all spring. And those are the kind of areas that our functionality is really reduced in those floods that we have every year. This is the minor flooding that we should have every year. And then if you look at some of the vegetation, some of it's great. The middle picture has wonderful willows, but the top and bottom picture, not so much. And native speaking, Monument Creek would have had a lot of willows and a sedge community, some trees, but not a ton. People have brought trees, but that's something else we're lacking is that robust willow community. And that also helps with wildlife. It helps with water temperature by providing shading. It also provides fish habitat as well. So that's some of the stuff that our current system is not so great at doing. And you see at these pictures, there's no real, like I said, floodplain. It's just the creek is very confined. So I'm going to go through a couple prototypes that everybody's been looking at and what these projects could be and like the scale and what's possible, what we could actually do with our system. And so this is an example of a functioning floodplain, and then it also has some water quality treatment from the neighborhood. And the water quality treatment is the dark green area you see between kind of the highest terrace and the creek itself. And these are wonderful things. They're not wetlands, but they're marshy areas, and they're places that can slow storm water down. Slow the water down, sediment can filter out, pollutants can filter out, and it can return to the creek in a more natural way. And these provide habitat, they provide green spaces, and they provide a water quality bonus. You can see in this picture that you can start to increase the sinuosity of the creek and not be long and straight and really fast. So that slows water down and that helps manage erosion. So Monument Creek and Fountain Creek will always move sediment. It's its job, but you want it to move in an even way. You want it to pick sediment up and set it down in an even way. If you have it picking everything up, that's scouring, and you have erosion. And then if it piles up in one place, that's deposition. And then there's like, it can move the channel, or in a high flow event, all that sediment can be like washed down and into the system even worse. So improving that sinuosity really helps. And then also in this one, it has much improved terraces for floodplain management, and attenuation. And these are pictures. The picture, I can't remember the picture on the center is, but these are examples of how these can look in urban areas. The top is, of course, a schematic, but the second one is actually one of these kind of areas where you can access the creek during low flows, but when it floods, like in the center picture, it actually rises up, accesses the floodplain, accesses the marshlands, the willows, and then can return back to its channel.
In terms of the sinuosity, in 2007, we nominated Monument Valley Park to the National Register. And one of the geography students at UCCS did his master's thesis on Monument Creek, and he was doing all his GIS mapping class too. And he discovered that 40% of the park was lost when the creek was channeled after the 1935 flood.
Oh, I believe that, yeah.
So if you're going to introduce all that sinuosity, you're going to tear out all of that WPA work that is done, that's on the National Register.
No, oh no, and
Okay.
that is a big challenge with this project. As we saw we have this narrow channel. But think of like being a skier. If you're going down a really steep slope and you don't want to go too fast, what do? Quick, shorter turns. If you're on a longer slope, you can take bigger swooping turns and you can still maintain your speed. So when you look at these channels and the sinuosity, think of it as like a skier going down a hill. If you want to maintain your same speed, you'll adjust your turns to manage that. And yeah, there's some areas here that are pretty steep, and we will have to do grade control flat out. There's grade control all up and down Monument Creek, and that keeps it from getting too steep too fast or getting really steep and then flattening out. And there will be some grade control. So we won't ever get away from that. The creek is incised enough, and then also it adds a lot of protection for infrastructure, streets, things like that. So this is an example. This prototype here is an example of what it can look like with a public-private edge to a creek. So again, this is getting more people engaged in the creek. It's moving them down to the water's edge. There's places where you can have outdoor activities and people, and yet there's some creek crossings. And there's still functional water quality parameters. You can still have the water quality treatment at the edge on the wildland side. And you can still have terraces, these kind of walkways and steps and terraces actually act as flood terraces as well. This is what's been done on the South Platte quite a bit. These functional things where you see steps and landscaping, that's great. You can sit on low flow, but at high flow, that can actually act as a floodplain terrace. And this is adding just a little bit more. Again, a picture on the far right-hand side is where you can see steps that act as floodplain terraces. And this is, maximum capacity functioning floodplain, as well as a very public space for people to enjoy. So here is a picture of what this would look like in application. And the goals of these projects at all time is to leave connected strips of undisturbed areas where people don't go for wildlife and for deer and things of that nature too. So we do intend to keep these buffers and these strips that can act like wildlife highways instead of just paths and for people. Hopefully we can get both coexisting. The amount of wildlife down on the creek is amazing. I see deer down there all the time. And like I said, it has a pretty robust fishery. So need to maintain what we certainly have.
Amy, before we continue, and sorry to interrupt, Terry Hayes has her hand raised
Okay.
for a question.
I'm sorry if I missed this before. And I'm not that familiar. I've never actually been down to Monument Creek, so I don't know what the flow is kind of like. Does this go completely dry at points? What is that going to look like if that happens? It seems like spending all this money around a creek, but I don't know if it stays running all year or it goes dry and it's going to be kind of an ugly area. And when it gets really low, you got mosquitoes, you got all kinds of things in the summer. So I'm just curious about the flow of the river.
Monument Creek does not run dry. It actually hasn't run from historical records. It's always had a somewhat of a base flow. And I say with our historical records, so they don't go back that far. So there is a base flow in the creek that will always be there. The lowest flow for Monument Creek and Fountain Creek both is October, November. Those are the lowest flows. Highest flows are in the spring, and then depending on the monsoons, July, August can also have pretty high flows as well. So yeah, that is something, yeah, if this ran dry, this would be a different kind of a creek project for sure. So. And the base flows of Monument Creek are right
Okay.
around 30 CFS.
Other question?
So I cycle up and down this quite frequently, and obviously one of the problems is going to be, what do you do with all the homeless people? Because there's homeless people up and down, camped out, trash, mess.
That is the number so far. It's interesting you say that because so far that's been the number one concern that people have brought forward. And unfortunately, the COS Creek plan does not have a magic bullet to solve this issue. We are hoping it could be a place where people could start to engage with this issue and talk about it. And how can we provide space for everyone to use and not have certain groups of people push other people in or out of areas. So that is like the number one concern so far. I was happy to hear the new mayor is making that part of his top 3 objectives for his first 100 days in office, was to help to start to address that. And no, the creek plan does not have a solution for that. There are things that can help with like vegetation management and how you make your spaces. So are they camping friendly or are they family friendly and things like that? So using vegetation and those public spaces in a way is one avenue that they can use, that the COS Creek plan can use. But yeah, if anybody has a solution to that problem, we are all ears, because it's a hard one.
Ooh, I certainly don't have a solution, but I applaud the conversation. I just hope it goes beyond the answer of we can make our spaces less accommodating or more accommodating. Because if the answer is we're just going to make our spaces less accommodating, that's why we have homeless encampments starting up on other creek.
This is,
area.
and you are 100% correct. If you push people out of one area, they're going to go to a separate area. And this is a regional problem. This isn't just these 5 projects or just Colorado Springs. If Colorado Springs is something, what does that do to Fountain? What does that do to Monument? It is certainly a regional issue, and we don't just want to push or move the problem around. It would be more beneficial for it actually to be addressed and find some form of a solution. The interesting thing is when I spend time on the creek, yeah, some people get really curious. You put on waders and go on the creek and people really want to talk to you about what you're doing. And the interesting thing is I find is that there is a section of people who really, really like that lifestyle. They like camping and being kind of on the fringes of it. And there will always be a group of people who likes that. They don't want to necessarily find different housing solution. And those are the people I find to be most interesting. Those that really, some don't want to be there, some are down on their luck, some have other issues, but some, that's their lifestyle.
There's an online question from Ann. I think you're muted, Ann.
Hi, this is very interesting. I'm up in Green Mountain Falls and Woodland Park area. And I'm old enough to remember a lot of floods. Are you working with, how do you deal with flood control as well as beautification? Thank you.
That is the goal of these projects, first and foremost, is to be able to be a functional system. And that's where using floodplain management, terraces, marshy areas and vegetation to help manage some of those flows, as well as good stormwater practices. SWENT is part of this agreement and part of this collaboration to help manage that stormwater flows. So I am going to go through the projects. These are schematics of what the projects could look like. Doesn't mean they will look like this at the end, but this is the visioning part we are going to try to do. And then I will go and I will talk about our very first project that we're trying to kick off in the next year or 2. So this is Monument Valley Park and Centennial neighborhood. The buildings on the white buildings on the right, you probably don't recognize that because that's actually our Fontanero service station for the city fleet and utilities emergency management. And we're having discussions about could that space be better used for something other than fleet management? Utilities will always have our emergency response vehicles there because it's by the interstate, it's centrally located. That's a safety issue. But that there could be some space there in that site. And this is again looking at how you can have nice improved sinuosity as well as some green spaces and then nice bikes, trails, and things of that nature. The next site down is College Landing at Uinta, and I always like this area of town because it has the old Van Briggle building there, which is just a really neat area. And this focus area is looking more at how can we bring and connect CC even more to the creek. There's a huge disconnect. You can't really from CC go down and access the creek very well. There's some pedestrians areas and trails, but it's really hard to get to, and it's really a steep area. So looking at this would be, could we engage that front a little bit more and make it more inviting to CC and all those who come and visit CC as well. This is America the Beautiful Park. I'm going to talk about it more in a little bit because it's our first project. The next project down is the Drake Waterfront Reimagined. As you all probably know that we have decommissioned, there we go, Drake Power Plant. It is no longer a coal-fired power plant. We are currently using natural gas generators there right now, but they're actually portable. So they're there right now because of our infrastructure. And there will always be some utilities infrastructure there because that's how I connect to the power grid. And we're looking at doing battery arrays there. But this is what Drake could be if Drake Power Plant wasn't there. Again, this is an area where you could have a lot of connectivity with the water. There is actually enough flow for some tubing, not like whitewater rafting, but you could put a tube in and float down. And this is also would help connect to downtown along with America the Beautiful. This is the last section. This is below Drake, and this is, they calling it Gateway Park South, but this is Dorchester Park. So the big pavilion area on the right is currently Dorchester Park. And this is this area is so challenging. It actually has a fantastic fishery, believe it or not. But there is a lot of homeless. The creek is very confined. Basically, we've rip-wrapped the whole thing, so it can't move because of our roads, which totally makes sense. We don't want our bridges washing out. But this is an area that could benefit a lot from an economic vitality kind of a project. And I would like this project because it's sort of close to my work, and I would like to go there. So this is the bottom and last project.
What is the street?
So the top one is Tejon and the bottom one's Cascade. Cascade and Tejon. I'm sorry. No, Nevada. That's Nevada. Nevada. Sorry. Yeah, there you go. The bottom one's Nevada. Sorry. Yeah, and Dorchester Park is currently right in the middle. It is. It's kind of one of the whitish area buildings where it currently is. So yeah, we will be doing outreach with those folks as well and seeing, again, having better conversations and hopefully conversations more around action than just what could we do or what, it's so multifaceted, but I think the needle could be moved on the issue. And so hopefully this kind of projects could be an area where people, as a community forum in which people can give their input and ideas.
Is Dorchester Park safe? The reason I ask is we had many meetings. I
always bring a friend when I go down there.
No, I don't mean in that sense.
Yeah.
We had many meetings with the city group about TOPS and our concern about percentages for open space, parks and trails. And at that time, the mayor came to a number of our meetings and he wanted to get rid of Dorchester Park. He'd already talked to the heirs. He considered it a problem area, and he said that the city was convinced, the attorney's office was convinced the heirs were willing to give it to the city and not have it be used as a park. He thought it was unreclaimable. So I think that's important to settle.
I didn't know that. So, yeah.
The city's attorney's office will have the minutes from those meetings because it was run by the city.
That is one of our water quality monitoring sites right at Nevada. And yeah, we generally do bring a friend. I've never had an issue personally down there. But Yeah, that area. Yeah. And the interstate's right there and the underpasses and everything else like that. It's quite challenging. And also with the homelessness you mentioned is the trash. And that's actually, when we talk about water quality and pollution, the trash is a huge component of that. If we don't have the trash in the waterways, that helps everything. So, and that's things like utilities and water conservation and stormwater, can't really solve. So that left uplifting note. The first project that was selected by the COS Creek Plan was America the Beautiful Park. And so you can see here in the center, we have begun to outline, the red outline is our project scope, the area we wish to be working in. The left is all of just mostly key points of like what different places could be and where. The focus area I'd like to look at on this is the goals and objectives. So we said on our goals and objectives, every single one of those bullet points that you see, if this project can't meet that bullet point and check it, then it needs to not be on the project. And these are all the things we want to do with this project. So on restoring the natural system of the creek, the healthy riparian corridor, that includes doing things like bank stabilization, reconnecting the floodplain, working on our terraces, natural sinuosity. We do some of these things, then that improves our fish habitat and passage. It provides environmental cleanup. We're also hoping to do a demonstration and a research opportunity. The Monument Creek and Fountain Creek are a stronghold for the fathead chub, which is one of our native little fishes. And it's not a sport fish, you can't catch it. But this is the stronghold for that. So even if there could be some kind of a demonstration of where these fish like to live and what their habitat lives like, and people have a tendency to think of the trout and the sport fish that you can catch. And, we have our little native fish as well. They're just as important. And so again, some of these things, if we do them naturally, we will have like water quality improvement. We will have enhanced wildlife habitat and things like that. So the other, so that's restoring the creek and its natural system. The other goal and objective is an economic catalyst. If anybody's been to America the Beautiful Park lately, that part of town could use a little bit of sprucing up. It is also the front porch to Colorado Springs. Our front porch should look nice. It's what everybody looks down and what everybody sees. And so we could really make this a tourist destination. People would want to come down, have lunch, hang out at the creek. It's getting late. They stay for dinner and have a really nice day downtown. And this could really open up this whole area right around America the Beautiful Park. I will tell you that the areas 9 on the right-hand side, just past that arcing curve, that is all been slated sometime in the future for redevelopment of condos, housing, and potentially even a hotel. I don't have a timeline on that, but it wants the owners of that want to redevelop that area. So that would be a nice area if you were going to live in one of those areas, to have America the Beautiful Park. This will, of course, increase property values, and it would be a nice place to have events, concessions, and inspire some community pride as well. The next objective is recreation destination. And this is getting people access to the water, providing environmental education and outreach, making a nice form of a beachfront where kids can go and splash and interact with the water. But along with this also comes, you need restrooms, you need concessions, you need Americans with Disabilities Act access, and kind of some of these other components that everybody can enjoy the creek, not just some people enjoy the creek. We also would need to improve signage, safety, parking, and potentially shuttle circulation as well to take the pressure off parking. The goal also with this is this project is trail connectivity. The Front Range Trail is broken in this area, and we're hoping to connect it all the way through Colorado Springs. It actually ends right at Colorado Drive. So if we could just push that trail system up north just a little bit more, we could connect and have a full trail system through there for bikes and things like that. The last objective is a sense of placemaking. And this is, again, where the front porch of Colorado Springs comes into play. It could be part of our brand. It could be part of who we are and what we do and what we value as a community. and where we put our values could reflect in this park, which right now we don't really have that in Colorado Springs. So other places do, a lot of other places. That is not a goal we have yet to achieve as a city. And this would be, again, a nice extension of downtown, a sense of community. And this is kind of also the human scale of where people can interact with something that maybe they wouldn't have the opportunity to nearly as much. The South Platte projects have been hugely successful in getting people who never really interact with nature down and interacting with nature. And I have this theory that people will only protect what they know. If they don't know about it, they won't protect it. So the more people we can get out and looking at our waterways and caring about nature and caring about the environment, the more protection they're going to get. And hopefully we can have more of these wonderful, nice, beautiful things because people recognize it for the value that it is. The last objective, though it's at the bottom, it's probably a foundational piece. And this is maintenance and management of these projects. You can't just do these projects and walk away. You won't have a project after a while. So there certainly has to be a funding and maintenance mechanism involved, and who owns that is another challenge. But that's why this agreement between all these organizations are trying to help meet that. Who could be responsible for this? There's also a huge concern for safety and security as well as enforcement. So that is also, as we've just discussed, a few times here, a really important key to have people come down, feel safe, and interact. We have to have all of those components. And then underneath all of these really beautiful pictures is actually city stormwater, utilities, and those other maintenance. It's the stuff that people don't want to see. It's the infrastructure. It's the things we need every single day, but they are the foundation piece that we can build all of these beautiful things on top. But underneath all of that structure has to be sound and safe, or the top will just be window dressing and it won't really matter. And that's why this agreement with Pikes Peak Waterways, the nonprofit arm, and the city and the utilities is important. So we can keep those fundamental things that aren't as glamorous, but keep them strong. So this is the website you can use, coscreekplan.org. There's all of these pictures and all of this information is on the website as well. And then there is a place where there's a FAQ and you can also send in feedback or comments. Of course, you can always use me as a contact as well. There are 3 PMs in this group, one from City Stormwater, which is Tim Biolcini, one from NES, which is Chris Lieber, which many of you may know him. And then I'm representing the utilities. So I am one of 3. So yeah, is there any more questions, comments, discussions? I would like to hear your all's thoughts now because I did a lot of talking.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I will send you a lot of my questions.
You can feel free to email me. Yeah.
But one of them, well, 2 of them that are really important to me. Caneos. I don't know if all of you have seen the Caneos exhibit that's been in the Pioneers Museum for the last 2 years, but Caneos at Mill Street are neighborhoods that were really important ethnic neighborhoods and have been really abused by the city, really incredibly abused. They don't even show up on this, which just to me is just outstanding.
Email me that spelling.
Yeah.
When you do email me that.
It's Mill Street. It's the neighborhood directly south of the last picture that you showed.
Oh, okay.
Directly south, that suffered the railroad, the coal, the pollution, having their neighborhood street renamed for a developer, which is probably the most obscene of the things that have happened to it. So to me, as a student of the 60s, it's just quite appalling. And then I think I actually will come to the utilities board because one of the things that Palmer did that was brilliant is most of the people who were coming to Colorado Springs weren't coming next to America the Beautiful Park. They were coming into the railroad station.
Yes.
So the south end of Monument Valley Park is where Palmer planted native trees or cottonwoods and willows throughout the park, but especially in the south end of the park, he planted a lot of native trees because he wanted all these people coming from Connecticut to see what native, because he recognized the water issue. And then also in the south end of Monument Valley Park, he had a huge botanical garden. And in the WPA Guide to Colorado, which was a WPA project written during the 1930s, but not published till 1941, called Colorado the Highest State, the two places that people were have to go if you go to Colorado Springs, the two places you had to see were the largest cyanide gold mill in the world. and the description of it, only 10 cents to take the tour. And the description of it should chill the blood of anyone. But the second place was the capital T, capital H, capital E, Botanical Garden for Colorado. This is mid 1935.
Oh, wow.
Today, we are the second largest city in Colorado. We have neither a botanical garden nor an arboretum. There are 20 other cities and towns in Colorado Springs that have one or both.
Mhm.
It is an embarrassment.
It
So-
is. And every time I go to other places, I always find the botanical gardens and I go there.
So maybe you
So-
could bring up to utilities that would be
Yeah,
something that would
vendors are
address the urban heat issue
Mhm.
and a lot of other issues. But to me, it's inconceivable that addressing the issues of Mill Street, addressing those native plant issues, and I will send you the list of my other comments. I've had 2 3-hour meetings with Chris Lieber and with Jan Martin, whom I know quite well. So they know.
Good.
But-
Oh, good. Well, then you
so-
got like everybody hit there.
Well, and so the
yeah.
last question, who is, I just, his name has gone out of my head. Beloved utilities person who died suddenly of a heart attack and one thing,
Gary Bostrom.
Larry Bostrom.
Yeah.
Larry Bostrom and I walked along the creek many times when we were forming the Friends of Monument Valley Park. And he always was pointing out to me all of these, I don't know what to call them, pipes, different colors on both sides of the creek. And he said one of the problems he thought would be very difficult for us to address is that most of those that were just dumping into the creek were from non-point solutions.
Yeah, those
Pollution. And that right now there weren't any regulations that governed that non-point pollution. We didn't even know where they were all coming from. So he really doubted, and that was 10, 15 years ago, he really doubted that we'd ever have water in the creek that would be clean enough for people to do recreating in it.
That is, so water, Judith knows this. So my bread and butter with the utilities is, I'm actually the Fountain Creek Watershed Project Manager, and data analytics and water quality is my specialty. And water quality on Fountain and Monument Creek, I will keep this to just an hour discussion. It's a mixed bag, and you have to take it pollutant by pollutant. And then you have to understand what pollutant is harmful to different things. Okay, so selenium to humans, not so bad. Selenium to fish, bad. Things like that. E. coli, naturally occurring, too much in your mouth, bad. Just hanging out there for fish, it's fine. So I've been studying a lot, and because I definitely understand the water quality. Like, well, would I go down in the creek without my waders? Would I send my kid down there? And the question, and unfortunately my answer is it depends. And so we're actually looking, a lot of our pollution is tied to flow regimes. And so E. coli, for example, is as highest at high flows because it's washing into waterways. Big storms bring E. coli into waterways. Low flow, base flow, it's actually not that bad. But then there's the E. coli issue, but then also flows. If we're encouraging people to go down to the creek, we need to make sure that those flows are safe. And so we are working on, it's still in concept, but either some form of interactive sign where you can either scan a QR code or have a reading of like what the flow is like right now. And is that a safe flow? Can you engage with the creek, or should you take a pass? People, it's deceptive what people think that it's a small creek, it's not going that bad. But the interesting thing at Monument Creek and Fountain Creek, at higher flows, the bottom liquefies. So what you think you're seeing as a foot of water is really a foot of water and then 2 feet of sandy water. And you can get yourself in trouble. So that is a huge issue. And it's, for me personally, water quality is my number one concern. Is it safe for people to interact? And what are our problem parameters, and how can we address those? And can we even address them? And if not, then what does that look like? Some of these things like selenium, manganese, some of the metals, they're naturally occurring in our geology. So, and then we have some legacy issues too. Iron, and we don't really have so much mercury anymore. Did back in the 70s, but we still have iron. We still have higher iron from our mining background that we'll probably always have higher levels of.
Got another question from Terry Hayes online. Terry, if you want to ask.
Yes, hi. I love the fact that, you know, there's objectives and goals and everything. It made the picture that you've painted look absolutely wonderful. But I feel it's doing a little bit of disservice if you don't also have a list of challenges, because I do think that the homeless is going to be a massive challenge for these projects. I really would recommend you look up more information on Dorchester Park. I live in Monument and I know all about that park. I actually lock my doors every time I have to drive by that area. So I think these are going to be, considering the amount of money that's going to be need to be spent, and I deal a lot with the public up here, and so I'm assuming you guys are going to have the same problem in the Springs, where people, once things don't go quite how you had wanted them to go, people are going to say Colorado Springs is wasting money, the utilities is wasting money doing this stuff if they can't manage the homeless. So I just think it would be a little more forthcoming to, in addition to your objectives and your goals and all the positiveness of it, is that you guys are realistic on what the biggest challenges you are going to have to overcome to make all of these a reality.
Yes, thank you for that. We can certainly add that in. I also hope that I can come back. This is very early in the process. We are barely chipping away at 10% design. As we move through and forward with these projects, I would like to come back and talk to you folks.
I have another question for you. Are you presenting this to the board as well, or just to the CAC?
It was recommended to me to present to you guys first.
Okay.
If you guys think that going up to the board would be appropriate, we'd be happy to take it there. If we want to just leave it here at this group for now, we can leave it there for now. But Ann Warner recommended this would be a good place for this presentation to start.
I was just curious. I know it's an information item, but if you're going to the board, I think it'd be good for us if give a recommendation or whatever. But if you're not at this
I
point,
would actually prefer if you guys recommend this is a good time to go to the board to go. If you think it's better to wait until we get further along or develop this a little bit more, then go to the board. That's something I would like to ask of you all, is to a recommendation for now, or when we get a little further along and we present to you guys again and then go to the board.
anyone have comments or suggestions on?
Yeah, I would recommend doing some more development before you go.
Development. Okay. Yeah, this is so new. This has been it's been interesting getting something so new kind of out the door.
I think the recommendation that the challenges be listed along with the great grand ideas, and that we didn't talk about, but you talked about issues with pollutants, and we talked before the meeting about the new pollutants. And I think you said that right now utilities doesn't have a way to measure what now I personally think is one of the most serious pollutants that we have. Recent article in the New York Times, each one of us, each one of you consumes the equivalent of one plastic credit card a week in microplastics. And they just did a big survey of rivers and creeks in Colorado Springs, including Monument Creek, and found huge amounts of microplastics, which now we know are in the bloodstream. And last year, for the first time, if anybody wants the citations, I can send them to you. Last year, for the first time, found in mother's breast milk. So you don't have to have your fish wrapped in plastic at the fish store.
No,
the plastic is already inside the fish. So.
And actually, Judith and I had an email discussion earlier. This is where this is coming from. Yeah, and the microplastics is actually a bigger concern for fish and aquatic life, more so than humans. It's not good for us either. I don't want to eat plastic, but for fish and the smaller organisms, that's an even bigger problem, because they'll sometimes eat plastic thinking it's food. And that's, yeah, malnourishment and stuff like that. So the upcoming pollutants, I have job security. Upcoming pollutants alone.
I have, as part of your process, looking at how other cities have dealt with similar projects. The one that came to mind for me was Barton Creek in Austin, Texas, which I lived there like 20 years ago, and it really was a destination. But they've struggled with pollutants and all kinds of things too. But that's an example of a pretty big, waterway that they try to make part of the city. It's kind of like a destination for tourists even.
And that's the thing I thought about we may want to add that to the presentation as we go further. We actually did a whole bunch of research on what's been out there, what's similar, how are they funding it, how are they maintaining it, what do these projects look like 10, 15, 20 years down the road. And it is doable. And most places have something like this. Our problems may be a little bit different, but they're not exactly unique. The South Platte is doing this, and in my opinion, the South Platte has more challenges than Fountain Creek does. They have way more pollution and way more issues than Fountain Creek does. Fountain Creek are, to kind of touch on what Terry said and mentioned, the three top concerns. There's more than three, but the three top ones are the homeless issue, water quality, and then I guess I would say flow regime along with sedimentation. How do you manage floods, high flows, low flows? And then again, managing sedimentation. It needs to move sediment, but not too much and not too little. And so those are the top three things with these projects that keep coming to the surface that we need to address. Some of them are easier to address than others.
And she did mention, since the person who's paying for this comes from Austin, Texas, that seems like that would be a relevant example. I'm not familiar with the example at all, but
I think that was one of our examples, actually. Does it have like a kind of a form of a boardwalk over like a wetland area?
Yes, and they used to, when I was there, even had swimming places and then places
Yeah.
that were just for dogs, but it was a destination for not only the residents, but for tourists,
For
so it
tourists as well.
became, like you said, the front yard of the city. But it was hot and sweaty there. I'm not living there anymore.
Well, thank you. And I think we're a good place for you to come and get a sounding board before you go to the board.
Yeah. Okay, well, this is great. Well, we get a little further along. I'll bring some updates and improve presentation, and whenever you think it's appropriate to put it on other channels. Yeah, so if anybody, you can email me or you can contact the coscreekplan.org if you want more information or if you think of something later. So.
Okay, before Ann steps down, any other questions?
Any other questions or comments?
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate you guys taking time to listen to this presentation. I really do. So
Okay.
This is a very, very important part. So everybody understands what we're doing. I don't want to touch your stuff. I'm just gonna. Backwards.
Okay, since I jumped the gun earlier and let Judith bring up her question, any other member entity announcements, comments? Yes.
Chris Crockett with Kono. I was asked to announce to the board that Kono is in the final steps of creating a neighborhood network of leaders that will speak into neighborhood issues for Central Colorado Springs. And is Annie still here?
I am still here.
Good, because this kind of impacts you. The area made up of 14 neighborhoods is roughly equivalent to Colorado Springs' 5th council district, currently represented by Nancy Henjum. There are approximately 20 members, and many of the individuals represent neighborhood associations at the local level. The areas are currently called 5A and 5B, but they'll think of something more clever and properly representative shortly. The body of neighbors will absolutely be the right stakeholders for anyone that PPACG wants to look at within District 5 where neighborhood input is needed. And this neighborhood does include the top section of the project that you're talking about, sort of the Colorado College North chunk of it. It will be part of land use, development, zoning, and big scale projects that happen within the broader geographic area of Central Colorado Springs, and will eventually be part of the community area planning currently happening in Southwest Colorado Springs. Thank you.
Good. Do you have a question, Miley, or a comment?
Well, I think it was in this section that you wanted me to bring up, or I wanted to bring up, where we stand with getting volunteers for this committee from the city.
From the city of Colorado, yes. And I know Welling had been working on that, but that's something that I will ask Welling to update us with and send that to Jared so he can disseminate the information out.
Right, that would be
Keep us
great.
legal on all of the emails and whatever.
Thanks.
And very good question, because Colorado Springs needs to be here. Yes, Judith.
Just community development. I'm trying to remember her name. who's an expert on community development, works a lot with that part of Colorado Springs that's south of America the Beautiful Park, the Mill Street, Caneos neighborhood. The neighborhoods that are really affected by the creek and
I
by
was trying to think of her name.
utilities.
Name's forgotten right now, but. Okay, anyone else with a question, comment? Announcement? You have anything, Jared?
I do not.
Okay, the only other one that I would mention is next month, if we could have everybody present, Jarrett will take our picture. And some of you will look great. Some of us will not. But anyway, that will get our picture into the book so that it can be posted.
And I apologize, Mr. Chair. I did mean to mention, starting tomorrow, I believe for both Mountain Metro as well as Fountain Municipal Transit, is to start the free fare for better, cleaner air, better air. I'm trying to think of exactly how they have that phrase, but starting tomorrow, no tickets required to ride any of the Mountain Metro or Fountain Municipal Transit vehicles through the end of August.
And that was very successful last summer, so that's a good thing.
And I'll just mention Ann has her hand raised.
Yes, Ann?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Now that I think about it, I thought, well, I will just tell you, up in Green Mountain Falls, you know, we're very interested in Fountain Creek and all of that. And we're working hard on that, as well as our land use code. Even though we only have 800 people in town, it is very difficult to keep people interested and informed. So we're working hard. I'm a member of the Planning Commission. And I hope that Woodland Park gets a member back on. I have mentioned this to several people, and I believe that if a town appoints somebody, that's their responsibility, right?
Yes.
The CAC doesn't approve that. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, because you know, I think that would be good. Bill Bowles is up here, you know, up in Park County and just the mountain area, the outskirts of the big cities. We're trying to help and be participants also.
And
Thank
we
you.
tried to help you by reaching out as well, having some of them. Several
know.
up the mountain did not have representation, so we've been trying to fill the CAC as much as possible.
You're really trying, and I know that you wanted to see about meeting up here, and they just said they didn't have the room to accommodate, you know, people. I talked to the mayor about it. But anyway, I won't keep
We'll
you
be
all.
persistent. It'll come around.
A picnic by the.
That's great. Thank you so much.
You have something else, Judith?
And are you aware that the city's director of sustainability, Samantha Bailey, lives in Green Mountain Falls? She and her husband just built a house up there.
I didn't know that.
That she's in the smart city, Colorado Springs. She's a dynamo. She's the director of sustainability. You should reach out to her.
Samantha Bailey.
Samantha Bailey, correct, right? And she's in the smart cities, city innovation office.
Smart, I don't even know about that. Isn't that stupid of me?
Well, and
Smart-
she started out actually at PPACG. She was the environmental planner, and she was hired by the city. And
Oh, I remember her when she was the environmental person.
yeah, well, she and her husband built a house in your town.
Well,
Look her up.
thanks.
That's
So
good to know.
what is this smart city thing you're talking about?
Well, the council had a real hard time naming it since some of the council hated the word sustainability, so it keeps changing names. But it's the Department of Smart Cities or Innovation, or she's the director of sustainability.
And that's the city of Colorado.
City of
Springs?
Colorado Springs, correct.
Well, by golly, I appreciate that information. Thank you. Never know what you're going to learn at these meetings. Thank you so much.
Okay, anyone else? Hearing none, we can adjourn the meeting then.